Okay.
Okay.
The sixth or seventh
Yeah.
day of the war, depending upon when war start, is fixed officially, and the headlines from the Gulf are predictable and at the same time suggest that there's a clock running down and we'll reach a point where there is trouble all over the world. The headline reads like this: Qatar warns war will force Gulf to stop energy exports, quote, within days. Gas producer says it will take weeks to months, quote, to restore deliveries after Iranian drone strike. Translation: Qatar has a natural gas field in the Gulf. It shares it with Iran. It's a little bitty country with a great deal of natural gas. 7% of the natural gas, I believe, goes into the Europe markets. Most of it goes to Asia, but this is a fungible product. Qatar is saying that if we shut down anymore, and they're declaring force majeure right now, that they're not responsible for not meeting their contracts because of the attack of drones into the oil field, into the gas field in these last hours. If we shut down, it'll be a ripple effect around the world. And the price of, you'll be able to get natural gas, but the price will be unobtainable for your audience. The same will have a ripple effect in oil as well as the Gulf continues to be choked. Several freighters have been hit, and the insurance is not now readily affordable by the carriers that are stacked up in the Gulf. So as natural gas shuts down and the price spikes, oil shuts down and the price spikes. And what that does is come right into our homes because the costs, the damage, the layoffs, well, you see what will follow. It's a series of shin bone, knee bone. Eventually, the whole organ crumples into a fetal ball. What we know, however, is that this scenario has been available for the war planners for years. It was always available. If we attack Iran, what bad can happen? Well, the energy oil fields of planet Earth are within rocket distance of Iran. We're finding out what can happen. I leave that alone because it is a joy to welcome my colleague Jeff Bliss is Pacific Watch. We're going to attend to production of the future that is ongoing right now in Nevada and up and down the Pacific coast. Not all of it is positive, but it is a changing landscape, quite different from talking about the Gulf, which is in retreat and contraction and fear. California, Nevada, Washington, Oregon have great possibilities and have a vision of the future. It is not consistent with the vision of the future in Washington, but it is a vision. So, Jeff, a very good day to you. Thank you very much. We're going to begin immediately with Pacific Watch, but first, I wanted to thank you for joining. It's a little earlier in California than it is here in Connecticut. At the same time, Jeff, my weather has turned predictably New England a winter fall. The hard rain came, hits the ground, turns into little icicles. A daring senior citizen named John Batchelor decided to go up the driveway to get the day's mail in the dark of a pelting hard rain with icicles hitting all around him. And going uphill was easy. Snap. Me and Charlie handled it easily, and Sailor, as he does, sat back and watched us. Okay, guys, we turned around and I realized what's wrong now. I had to go down the icicle slick of my driveway. And Jeff, that distance, I guess it's about an eighth of a mile, took me upwards of 20 minutes. I crept along on the snow. I'm sure you've had that phenomenon in New England, where the ground looks okay, but it's covered with these little icicles that if you try to put your weight on it, you're going to go down. Good day to you, Jeff.
Good day, John. Yes, and even here in California, if you go up into the higher elevations, up into the mountains like the Sierra Nevadas, which was near where I was earlier this week, or even some of the mountains surrounding the LA area where they're skiing. Yeah, you have that phenomenon happen. But That's actually one of the reasons why our folks moved us when I was younger from the Boston area to the West Coast. My dad used to say, "I'm tired of shoveling that snow."
Yep. Well, I've been shoveling a lot of it this winter. It reminds me of we haven't had a heavy winter like this, to my experience, in at least a decade. I don't remember anything coming this hard, but it's over. It's springtime, and I saw peonies popping through the snow. I haven't seen the snowdrops yet, because there's a foot of snow on top of them. They'll be here, and wherever there are rocks, any boulders out near daffodils, the reflected sunlight lights up the ecosystem of about 8 square feet, and the daffodils pop out. So I went looking for them yesterday. It's a joy. This is a joyful time of year to springtime, except the world is at war, and we will attend to that. But we're not right now. We're going to do Pacific Watch because there are positives here, and there's a lot of Sim City thinking, and I enjoyed that game. Once upon a time, when it was the top of the PC games available. Let's see. Today is March the 6th. Check me, Jeff. I get confused what day it is. March the 6th. All right, here we go. We'll begin. 5, 4, 3, 2. This is the making of the John Batchelor Show, Carrot Soup, and I have a prime patch of carrots here in Jeff Bliss, Pacific Watch, and we begin now. This is John Batchelor. Pacific Watch is Jeff Bliss, and he joins me now, having toured the West Coast most recently, but we're going to go to our favorite city because it's being rebuilt before our eyes. That is Las Vegas. Jeff, a very good day to you. Every day is a good day in Las Vegas, looking at the future. You have guided me through a city that you know very well over many years. I come to it as a SimCity player. Oh, we're going to put the train station here. We're going to put the In-N-Out Burger 3-story Marvel Palace here. However, in general, what is going on right now looks to be Las Vegas refashioning itself, and that's very good for the construction unions. There are other union problems in Las Vegas, but the report you sent me from Southern California, the news report, is that there's a whole lot of construction going on. Is this an unusual amount, or is this something that's ordinary for Las Vegas? Good day to you, Jeff.
Good day, John. There's always a lot of, as far back as I can remember, there's always been a lot of construction going on because not only do you have people building the hotels and the casinos and the resorts that are part of that, but they're building the homes and the apartments for the people that are serving those industries. And that grows from there. You have government that attaches to that and schools. So it's, Vegas is not just gambling. Of course, that's the biggest part of it, but it ripples out from there. It's always been that way. That's why there's Sphere there, the big entertainment structure. That's why Formula One's there. That's why the Oakland A's have moved there, is because it all ripples out. And in construction right now, even though 2025 was kind of a tough year for construction overall, they lost a lot of jobs. There's still so much going on there. It's like I said, the entertainment venues, the academic venues, even the talk about Hollywood 2.0 coming there would bring additional construction. But it's, and now you're talking about things like the Bright Line train that would run from California to Vegas, and the Boring Company doing the work for transportation underground. All of those things are part of the construction industry. It's not just buildings, it's the infrastructure.
Let's go to Bright Line because I saw a news report from Southern California that there's money trouble at Bright Line. I thought, oh no, here we go again. Is this going to be another high-speed train saga where the promises are made, the money continues to be spent, goes higher and higher, and we have nothing to see? My understanding is that there's a package from the federal government, and there's money from local to be raised locally with investors. And both of those things need to come together in order to proceed building the Bright Line, which is a 200-mile-per-hour train is going to run up the centerpiece of the highway that now connects Southern California, Los Angeles area to Las Vegas. Did I say all that correctly, Jeff?
That's correct. And, it's interesting because we have the high-speed rail with which they've been working on for years in California. It's gotten nowhere, and it's been a big money sink to the tune of, I think, over 100 billion, 110 billion so far, and no track laid at all. And they promised it would have been up and running several years ago. So there's a lot of anger about that in California. But Brightline is a public line, not public in the sense, I mean, anybody could ride it, but it's a construction project that's financed both by public and private. But when it comes to the public financing, it's through loans primarily. So that's one of the things that distinguishes it from California, is that people are willing to give it money as long as they get a return on it. And it follows a very smart route. That's the I-15 freeway, which everybody uses to go from Southern California there. It'll save time. It'll be a little pricier, but it'll take you right into Vegas. So people are pretty excited about it.
There are also hotels being built. And of course, the big one, the stadium, which is going to be a joy to consider playing baseball in the middle of a Las Vegas weekend. However, we turn from Las Vegas to Travels with Jeff, because Jeff Bliss takes on these rough assignments. He covered the whole of the Pacific coast down into Southern California in these last days. My understanding is your Travels with Jeff itinerary included Reno and Portland and Seattle, but I lost track after that. I'm exhausted already. Can you generalize first and then give us headlines of each city you stopped in?
Yeah, so you had it right. Although it was my wife that was in Seattle, and I'm in Sacramento right now. And then in a couple days, I'll be heading down the coast primarily, or through the Central Valley. So I'll get a good taste of the rest of California until I get back home in Southern California. But it's been interesting. Reno, which is a kind of it's always been a poor stepchild to Vegas in terms of the money and the gambling, was really kind of a ghost town. I was surprised, and likewise, Portland was empty. I was there in the middle of the week in downtown area, and you could have swung an old coat around and not hit anybody. It was so empty, and so many businesses have pulled out of there. Walking through the downtown, it's really so sad to see what's happened to Portland. And the folks in Portland, even the most liberal folks there, are talking about it, saying, boy, I think we need to change our tune because it isn't working. And you're seeing that reflected in the gubernatorial race that's going on right now. People are very unhappy with Kotek, the current governor. And now in Sacramento, it's pretty busy actually in Sacramento. Sacramento has a lot of things going on. I don't know how much growth is here right now, but it is a pretty vibrant metro area, because you not only have Sacramento, but you have neighborhoods that are attached to it. Like many other places, it's got the urban sprawl thing going on.
Jeff, about Sacramento, you brought to my attention a photograph. I want to be positive here, but there it is. A photograph of the state capitol in the distance. You recall that picture, the photograph? And in the foreground, there were three human beings curled up in unnatural positions. I would have said at first glance, they might be deceased. One was face down, another one was twisted sideways, wearing what looked to be torn coats in some fashion. I'm not unfamiliar with the climate at that point, gathered around the gutter of a suburban area. I can imagine there are probably homes around there. And in the distance, not very far distance, I would say half a mile, you could see the state capitol's dome. That's Sacramento. Jeff, those three people are just lying in the gutter or near the gutter, and I'm presuming they're not dead, and that's fentanyl. Is this scene ordinary in Sacramento, or was I seeing something extraordinary?
Unfortunately, it is an ordinary sight. And you're right. It was right down the street from the Capitol. I believe that was a park and business area that leads to the Capitol. And this is where the resources are, the feeding stations, the care stations, and really not much attention in terms of, policing. So you have a lot of homelessness in that area. And it does appear that they were, fentanyl users because of the unnatural twisted nature of the way they look there. That's so typical of fentanyl. And this has been a problem in Sacramento where it's spread out to the outer suburbs, out to the state and city parks. So there's a lot of concern in Sacramento. It's a situation like Los Angeles and Portland and Seattle and San Diego, where it's just gotten out of hand. They've had the attendant problems with crime, sanitation. Sanitation's been a big problem, and Sacramento for a long time kind of looked at itself much like Portland and Seattle did, as kind of a metro area among areas with rivers and trees, forests. But a lot of that has been really upset because of the homelessness situation.
I don't mean to be difficult, but you gave me a number recently. 28 billion was the expenditure by California for the homeless. And within walking distance of the Capitol, 3 human beings in the gutter with trash all around them. Jeff, that's the place where the people are in charge of solving homelessness with 28 billion. I don't want to use the word failure. I'm puzzled why this is something that the people of Sacramento tolerate. Those legislatures come and go from other parts of the state, not all burdened with this amount of despair. Children walking by that, what are they to take from what the world they're growing up in? I ask rhetorically.
Yeah.
It is odd. Now, Jeff, that's an emergency. Those human beings are struggling. Why? Where are the first responders?
Well, they're overextended, and I want to step back and talk about that 28 billion. That's not 28 billion that we're spending right now. That's 28 billion dollars that was allotted for homelessness they can't find. We're missing 28 billion dollars, and nobody has an answer. And when the governor is approached about it, he kind of shrugs his shoulders and says, "We're working on it." And just this past week, managed to secure another $500 million for his Care Court program. And what Care Court program was designed to do is to get these people off the street, to tell them, this isn't acceptable. We got to get you into some kind of care. And if you do it, then we can give you housing. If not, then we're going to take some other steps. But, we've already sunk billions into this Care Court program, aside from that 28 billion. And they've only treated 22 people in the state. 22, not 22,000, not 2,200, 22. And this is just so indicative of what's been happening in California when it comes to the homeless. Really do have the homeless industrial complex here. Everyone gets help. The big political donors, the politicians, the developers, the NGOs, but not the homeless.
One more detail before we leave the Travels with Jeff. You sent me a Starbucks sign, and the indication from the report is that Starbucks back office headquarters is leaving the West Coast. They're abandoning it, or they're expanding. How to read that?
No, they're abandoning it. So a number of important jobs are moving from their headquarters there in the Seattle area to Tennessee, which has been very welcoming, very friendly to Californians who want to leave, both the residents and businesses like In-N-Out Burgers and others. And there are a lot of people that are worried because of the overregulation, the lawsuits, et cetera, the homelessness, the crime, that Starbucks, which has been a pillar of Seattle society, is planning to move all their operations to Tennessee. I don't know if they will do it a complete move, but a significant chunk is moving there now.
Jeff Bliss is Pacific Watch. We're going to turn to the politics of California, not because we're going to do policy, but because major politicians of the Democratic Party are now moving around and looking at the presidency in 2028. This is, very carefully, Pacific Watch. Jeff Bliss is Pacific Watch. I'm John Batchelor. I'm John Batchelor with Jeff Bliss, who's just back from travels. Well, he's still on the road, Travels with Jeff, touring his domain, which is all of the West Coast plus Las Vegas. We come now to national politics. Repeatedly, I see Governor Newsom gaining very good media here on the East Coast, where There are critical states in balance for any electoral college contest. I'm thinking of Virginia, certainly thinking of Pennsylvania. The governor continues to get really good media. By what does John mean by that? It doesn't just give him straight A's. It's a picture. It's him looking engaged, talking to podcasters. I saw him with Katie Couric's podcast, a podcast I highly recommend. Katie Couric is a former TV star, but she does a wonderful job of being an at-home mom, grandmom perhaps, I'm not certain, at-home mom with a camera set up, and somewhere is her producer. I don't think she's with Katie. And they start at various times in the afternoon on Substack. And Katie talks to her friends or associates, and everybody shows up for Katie. And it's charming because Katie doesn't have a script. She's not reading a tote board, the way they do in television. It's just Katie. And so there she was with Gavin Newsom. And it was extremely warm, Jeff. Katie likes Gavin. Gavin likes Katie. It was a campfire meeting, telling stories. He can be charming, especially when he's humble. Is that what you see in California too, when he speaks about his struggles in life?
Yes and no. It's there are a lot of contradictions when it comes to what he's talked about with his growing up years and with his own battles with dyslexia and other issues. And it's something that he totes out quite a bit these days. It's a big part of his book, A Young Man in a Hurry. And of course, he's ostensibly going on this book tour to sell the books, but it's really a run up. What started with, in my memory, Profiles in Courage. It seems that every presidential wannabe comes out with their autobiography about their struggles and about how they are just like you and me. And of course, they've been doing this with Gavin's book. But California kind of looks at it and goes, okay, his supporters, the people who are the blue folks who voted him in, like him, the people who didn't dislike him greatly, but he's had some missteps along the way on this book tour. One was in Georgia when he told an audience that had quite a few black members in it, said, I'm just like you. I did poorly on my SAT scores. I can't read, even though he got to the dyslexia part later. And then this week, talking about the situation in the Middle East, and he said some things that greatly upset the Jewish community. So I don't know how that's going to play with some of his supporters. But overall, the reaction to Gavin's book and his book tour and his place on the national stage and even international stage, if you hate Trump, you like what he's doing. If you like Trump or you dislike him, you don't like what he's doing. It's just like everything else in California, the rest of the nation. It just depends where you start from, because that's what your answer is going to be.
One more detail. I noted on the second day of the war, or first day of the war, depending on how you count it, we had a statement from former Vice President Harris against the conflict. There was no significant reason for that statement except for the fact that she's close to going toe to toe with Gavin Newsom for the nomination. That would be the reason to enter into the opinion of the conflict in the Middle East. Is that something you read in your papers? We have 30 seconds.
Yeah, that's it. But it left people scratching their heads, and it did not advance her cause. If she's running for president again, that didn't help her in the least. For most people, it's going to be a forgettable thing, but a lot of people thought really it was ill-timed, and she seems to be pandering to one part of the base, and it didn't come off well.
How does she match up against Gavin face to face in the California primary? Good or bad?
Bad. She will not beat him, especially now. She's just been really slipping.
Jeff Blitz is Pacific Watch, Travels with Jeff. I'm John Batchelor. There, we got that done. Now we can roam around a little more in Travels with Jeff. Seattle, Jeff? Seattle losing Starbucks back office? I mean, wow, those are the big salaries. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, Amazon, they lost parts of Amazon earlier, and Amazon, I don't think Amazon would pull out of there, but Amazon has threatened it, that's for sure. There are a number of different companies, and now with this new socialist mayor, who's Mondami light, you know.
I'm
What?
reading about it's a young woman with no political experience, and I believe she's been identified as a socialist or a democratic socialist. I get lost in the use of terms. And she's held press conferences, but I have not seen anything substantive that she's done that would be disruptive. Did I miss it?
Well, she had said, you know, she's talking about raising taxes, talking about, you know, taking housing, but her, you know, when companies said, well, if this is going to be like this, we're going to leave. She's essentially said, well, we won't let you leave. You know, we'll go to court to keep you from leaving. Like they have a way to do that. She has very little understanding of how the real world works. This is somebody that's lived with her parents, whose partner doesn't work, doesn't pay for her kids' care. And she's all okay with it. And that's kind of the pipe dream that she lives in.
And she's the mayor, right? And I'm unfamiliar with the governance of Seattle or the state. The mayor has the power of taxing because for example, in New York City, Mayor Mamdani does not have the power of raising taxes. He needs Albany to do that. Nor can
Yeah, I think aside from, but you have city taxes, and she can spearhead an effort. I don't think she can. She doesn't have just the ability to be a dictator about it, but she's a pretty strong voice these days. I mean, imagine her getting elected. She has enough backers, that's for sure. And money wise, you know.
Well, we have a trend here, and I can see the trend of 3,000 miles away. Southern California, the billionaires leave, and when the legislature goes through to, what is it, 5% of their assets every year, something like that, something fantastic. They leave. Most notably, Zuckerberg has moved his residence, I believe, to Florida. He bought some incredible state, whatever the number was. It will go higher. And others have announced they're leaving over these last months. That's Southern California. You could say, okay, that's Silicon Valley, that's Southern California. But when it comes to Seattle losing Starbucks back office, those aren't the zillionaires. Those are men and women who are paid a good six-figure salaries to maintain a global franchise that is highly successful. And Jeff, it's fair to say, that's real money, Jeff. That's not billionaires. That's real money.
Yeah,
Thousands of people are leaving. Now,
yeah.
there should be, isn't there panic?
There's a big concern, you know, in California when you had, you know, Ro Khanna, the representative in Silicon Valley, and you know, some other people, including the unions, try to push for this billionaire tax. As you pointed out, you'd had half of the state's billionaires leave. It was over close to $2 trillion in capital. So yeah, people are worried about it, and then, you know, people push back on that and enough so that's not really a thing right now. Aside from Bernie Sanders going around the country saying, "Let's tax all the billionaires another 5% or get rid of them." But yeah, California's worried because that's a lot of the tax revenue, and yet you have somebody like like Nithya Raman, who is you know, always been a Karen Bass ally, running for mayor in Los Angeles, and she's Mamdani. She's, you know, this woman in Seattle, and maybe even worse. And some of the things that she's done as a Los Angeles, you know, city county legislator has just been horrible. You know, attacking, for example, automakers because they did not make it. Instead of going after the auto thieves, going after the makers of the cars, saying they didn't make it tough enough for them to steal, or they made their catalytic converters too easily to be removed. That's always kind of the socialist approach. Don't blame the criminal, blame the money.
Let's turn to something that's more at hand given his travels with Jeff. Here on the East Coast, we're watching the tote boards for the gasoline stations. I believe the report from Mr. McTague out of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania was 18 cents as of 48 hours ago. The theory is that when oil barrel of oil goes up, it takes some time for that to ripple through and get to the gas station. Have you seen any sharp change in the tote boards, Jeff, driving the West Coast?
Oh yeah, it's started to go up into the fives. We're higher than everybody else, but uh, we knew this was going to happen anyway because we're losing refinery capacity. We've had two major refineries close. Chevron's threatening to pull everything out of the state, and Chevron's a huge player here. And you have a number of other large and independent, smaller independent refineries who are saying we can't really operate here like this anymore. So you have all that going on, and then you throw the war into this, and there's panic. There's panic among the people who are pricing it, and even among the people who are buying it. I know there are people in other industries. For instance, I talked to a person recently who's involved with the state's asphalt industry, and that's everything they're putting down on roads and playgrounds, you name it. And they're concerned because oil plays a big part in what they do, both in terms of the machinery they run and the product they create. But they're just one of many. The plastics industry, the pharmaceutical industry, they're all touched by this. And so there is a great concern in California. And we have to go back to something we were reporting a year or two ago, that there were estimates by, for example, the Marshall School at USC, saying that gas in California will likely go to $8 to $10 a gallon. And that was without the war.
The war right now is sending Brent crude in Europe out of reach. That's how fast it's climbing. I talked to south of France yesterday, and Simon Constable, and it already has shown up in Albi, the little town nearby his farm, Chateau, that he drives diesel. Most of Europe drives diesel, not petrol, a gasoline. And he sees it already starting to move, even though the deliveries shouldn't have come through that quickly. So Brent crude is climbing, natural gas is climbing. His electricity costs, he doesn't see that every day, so he could only estimate how fast that's going to rise. Electricity was already expensive in Europe. I have not seen it here yet. I noted that when we went to church last week, I see the tote board in Kent, which is the highest price here in Western Connecticut. They can get it. And it was 309, which sounds really good to you in California, but that is okay price in Connecticut, which is cheaper than New York. New York has more taxes. What I'm expecting is that when I go to church this Sunday, I'll see that higher and continue to climb. Your gasoline in Southern California is not entirely about the war, correct? It has more to do with the refinery shutting down.
For right now, yeah, it's more about the refineries and the rules and the taxes. When it comes to gas, well, when it comes to any tax, but certainly when it comes to gas taxes, it's the highest in the nation. And we're now paying more for gas in California than they do in Hawaii. Think about that. Hawaii has almost zero when it comes, a 0% capacity when it comes to production, and zero when it comes to refining. And it's gotten so bad here in California in terms of sourcing energy that we're getting our shipments from the Bahamas. So in the effort to keep things clean, and this is where a lot of this is from, clean air. We're buying our gas, our oil from, getting it from the Bahamas. So then ships truck it or, ship it through the Panama Canal all the way over here. Meanwhile, those ships are burning bunker oil, which is the dirtiest oil there is, dirtiest fuel. And then it gets over here, and then they wonder why it's so expensive.
Wait a minute. You're California. Okay, my geography might be a little wobbly here, but you're California. That's on the other side of the continent. The Bahamas, that's the Caribbean.
Yep.
Within easy flight distance of the East Coast of the United States. Nobody closer would sell it to you? We got Mexico. I hear Mexico has gasoline. You hear that?
Yeah, they have plenty of it, and plenty to spare. But we're so much is being shipped this way, and it's when you think about California When you think about Wisconsin, the dairy state, California has more dairy cows, has a bigger dairy industry. When you think about oil, people think about places like Texas and Oklahoma, but we have a massive oil industry in California, but it's been winnowed down by
And it
people
would be
like
bigger. It would be bigger. The oil's still down there. The pictures from the 1920s of the wooden rigs up and down the California coast, Santa Barbara, Huntington Beach, covered with oil well drilling, and it's still there. And
it,
you're going to the Bahamas?
it's where we in the area we live is not far from Huntington Beach, and used to look across the beach there before I was born, and it resembled a forest because there were so many oil derricks. Now, aesthetically, I'm not sad to see it go because Huntington Beach is a great place to sun and surf. But oil's everywhere. It's in the backyard of Beverly Hills High School. They get a ton of money because they have an oil well on their property that provides royalties. But oil wells were everywhere, and you'll drive down through a place like Long Beach, California, and it's just there are oil wells tucked in the back there, or other places.
Is there an explanation for this, or is it some fever that swept through California in 1965? What happened, Jeff?
It really kind of swept through in the 60s, when it came to areas near beaches or, the big offshore oil fields we had. That was killed by the famous Santa Barbara oil spill, which did a lot of damage, not on the same level as the Exxon Valdez, but still pretty bad. And every time there's an oil leak or there's a problem with gas or questions about it getting into the water table, that kills even more of the industry in those regions. So, yeah, a lot of it has to do with pollution, and of course the idea that if we're not producing this, then we're not spewing it out the end of the tailpipe. So it's a concerted effort to stop pollution from start to finish.
Oh, here's a headline that connects directly to what we're talking about. U.S. lost 92,000 jobs in February. This is a jobs report just came through from the market. That was short of January's gain of 126,000 and worse than the gain of 50,000 the economists polled by the Journal had expected. The unemployment rate was 4.4. Labor markets slowed markedly last year, with the U.S. adding fewest jobs outside of a recession since 2003. That was in part due to the Trump administration's cuts to the federal workforce through a combination of layoffs and buyouts. But it also reflected the cautious approach to hiring that many businesses adopted to combat uncertainty about tariffs, and now we have the war. So, Jeff, it's not going to wait. It's coming our way right away. It was slow hire, slow fire. Now it's going to be no hire.
Yeah.
You can't. And the price of gasoline. Now, reason with me, Jeff. The price of gasoline determines the ability of people to work in California. If those people don't work or can't make ends meet when they have to pay the price of gasoline, the price of electricity, the taxes, they have to go find another state where they can work. Losing those people, not the rich, the middle class, that's the big number to lose. And the fewer people paying taxes, the more California is running on borrowed money, bonds, and what? I mean, am I exaggerating here? Or
no, not at all. And this is something that you and I have been talking about for quite some time, is that, California seemed that they were willing to let go of all these people to Nevada and to, Idaho and Texas and Arizona and Tennessee and Florida, and yet import people who don't have the same technical skills, the same knowledge base. And it's a problem. And for a long time they were saying, okay, we're hollowing out the middle, but we're going to count on the upper end to pay for things. But now they're chasing those people off. And you're right. And it's not just, getting to work and doing the work, but, I was talking about things that California is known for. California is the biggest agriculture state. So it's going to cost more to truck food in and out of the field, out of the fields and to market and to get those workers there and all the machinery, that's going to show up in food costs across the nation. I mean, this really ripples out from here.
And what is okay, Gavin Newsom's running for president. All right, he's going to happy talk, charming. All right, it's a personality thing. Vice President Harris is running for president. Good, but there are people who are not running for president, who are young people in politics. Karen Bass is not young, so I'm looking beyond the mayor right now. Do they have a vision of the state that's decidedly different and that's balanced? The young people, the young politicians.
Balance, that's hard to say. Right now, we have 13 people running for governor. 4 of them are Republican, 1 of them is independent. And the front runners for the Democrats are kind of a continuation of what Gavin's doing. They tend to be people like Katie Porter, who are pretty liberal, or Antonio Villaraigosa, former Speaker of the Assembly and LA mayor. It's the same thing. Most of their commercials, or a lot of them, tend to focus on things like being against ICE and immigration raids, whereas the Republicans are talking about, responsible government, about responsible spending, about getting California back on its feet. And a couple of those Republicans, interestingly enough, are doing well because the Democrats are kind of canceling each other out. We had one drop out today, but we had a new one added yesterday. And there is concern among the Democrats that they could cancel each other out, even in the jungle primary type of thing.
Is anyone talking about the price of gasoline? Do they mention it?
Not really. I mean, the Republicans are talking about overall costs, but the Democrats aren't. The Democrats' main platform plank is, we hate the orange man. Trump is bad, and that I'm not kidding. That's really what it's about. Now they will sometimes have add-ons, these trailers they hitch to their platforms that are about, well, we need to have more childcare, we need to have more housing, or make it more affordable. But that's about it. We have a billionaire, Tom Steyer, who's running, and he just runs on being angry and how they have to fix corporations and how politicians are horrible, but doesn't really seem to have a great plan other than more housing is what we have to have. And that doesn't seem to resonate much.
That isn't a vision of solving the shutdown of the refineries. So no one talks fundamental infrastructure. It's okay if they don't. I'm just trying to determine a baseline here.
Well, it's not okay because that's an important thing. And I know there are people frustrated about that. There are no real solid plans. How do we fix the infrastructure? How do we fix the schools? How do we, continue to make sure that our environment's okay, but make it and do that in a sense where we're not choking off the economy. People aren't really talking about that.
All right, we can't solve California. I understand. I'm not looking to solve it. I'm just looking to puzzle through. New York and Connecticut have their burdens as well. In other words, very high taxes. So much so that corporations struggle to form. Startups struggle in blue states with high taxes. And why we have high taxes is we have older established cities that are demanding for public utilities and public working. I understand all that. I'm not going to solve it, but it does give a great advantage. Certainly, the Democratic Party must see this, a great advantage to states that are red, Tennessee being one of them, and Florida and Texas being obvious, but Nevada being, and more, and Montana being one of them. We know Californians moving to Montana, at least changing their residence. That has to matter to the legislature, does it?
It does. They don't really, I think the legislatures are thinking very short term right now. They're not planning out for the 5 or 10 years when they could be at the losing end of things. And it's interesting you mentioned Montana. Here in California, people will say, "Yeah, I'm packing up. I'm going to Tennessee, or I'm going next door to Nevada, Arizona." But up in Oregon, they're talking about leaving for Montana and for Idaho. That's where they want to go to. And the people from California who moved there a few years ago are shaking their heads saying, we've just turned it into California light. The housing prices and accessibility are horrible here. We have all the big city problems. So this is what we're seeing repeated across the country. And now you're actually seeing some people leave Texas because the big influx or the big move of people from California, they brought their blue state politics and they're already sick of that.
Well, that also puts the Democrats in the game for the Senate seat, the California voters. Although it feels like urban myth, Jeff. I mean, are really there enough Californians to influence the Democratic vote in Texas? I don't know. I'll accept it when I see the numbers afterwards. Montana, however, I've been told repeatedly by people who used to live in Bozeman that it's now all California, which is not accurate, but is a generalization of what's going on in the states. So there's a knock on effect. As California loses taxpayers, other states gain taxpayers, and that's an advantage. So we'll call it a draw here. That's why we emphasize. That's why Jeff and I, when we report, we emphasize Las Vegas because there's nothing negative to say about Las Vegas except build it faster and let's get that in. Oh, Jeff, about In and Out. Did you see that photograph you sent me of those long lines? Where was that opening? That In and
That
Out?
was in Tennessee. I believe it was in the Franklin, Tennessee, which is a well-to-do, area outside of Nashville. And there are a lot of Californians there, and they've been talking about it for a long time. They want their In and Out, but on top of that, they've been proselytizing to their Tennessee natives neighbors, and so people have been showing up in droves. That's pretty much the case. Anytime In and Out opens outside of the California area, it comes in and lines a couple miles long develop because people want to try it. And really, once they try it, they tend to be customers for life because it's so good.
Oh, well, I immediately thought about the political lobby that can form around this. I'm the senator from In and Out that would have weight in California. All right, it's time to time travel, Jeff. Here we are in 2026, but we're going to travel 2,000 years to the first century AD in the Roman Empire in Londinium, because we're joined momentarily by Germanicus, who has agreed to give us a preview of his philosophizing come Sunday at 6 p.m. in the midst of several wars that were easily predicted by the emperor of Rome once upon a time. And here we are in the 21st century. So we're going to welcome Germanicus, who sometimes goes by pseudonyms in the 21st century, but he's very clearly thinking of the first century AD. A very good day to you, Germanicus. Jeff Bliss and I are awaiting your thinking about the most recent development, which is days of warfare now leading to alarming headlines in the Middle East and in London that the natural gas prices and the Brent crude prices are climbing soon enough to be out of reach, almost to the point where there's not going to be availability and the economies will start to shut down. So, your preview for your remarks on Sunday. Good day, Germanicus.
Good day, gentlemen. A number of things have made themselves clear in the first days of the war, and those are elements that are on people's mind and that have been so far demonstrated, if not fully demarcated. You just mentioned the economic consequences, rising prices, and rationing in the future. All of that is there. One thing that I think may have been surprising to the administration is the fact that Iran didn't fold right away, and it has kept its most capable missiles in reserve. And apparently, Iran is now beginning to unleash those weapons, including hypersonic weapons, on Israel. To me, the most important manifestations have been the way in which the emperor and his court have deployed what I like to call the sacred narrative. That is to say, the instructive canon of America's um, religion, if you can call it that, and I think you not only can but should. As soon as the various pieces and tropes of the sacred narrative were invoked, they were invoked almost as Romans, that is, would have invoked the gods in the pursuit of some divine and divinely um, entertained mission. And so you see all of these elements from previous wars going back to the very beginning of our nation. The enemy is evil and demonic, and all of those words have been used. We are the redeemers of humanity. We are there to succor the downtrodden and oppressed Persian people, and we are there to punish the wicked. Those demonic forces must be destroyed, and calling upon America to properly prosecute what amounts to a holy war is very much a part of not simply the rhetoric, but the invocation of this kind of sacred framework, which in itself, once it is invoked, operates as a kind of dispensation, and people fall into that. I mean, you can see this among the Republican right, that there was lots of opposition to a war with Iran, but once the holy words were invoked by the emperor, things begin to firm up, and doubts are still being entertained, but the necessity, the kind of mission focus of the war is now in place. And I was just, right before I came on, I was watching the emperor in the Oval Office, surrounded by about 20 or 30 of his counselors, shall we say, including a Pontifex Maximus, which I'm not good at declining into the feminine form. And she was invoking God's word and saying essentially, wherever Trump walks, that is where God walks. And so you have very much a kind of Roman-like ritual being presented and put out there. And so that, and the amusing thing, well, ironical is probably a better word. The ironical insight is that the same is unfolding in Israel, and in Israel it is a different kind of sacred narrative. And so the invocations you see, and they're in all of the media, whether it's state media, public media, social media, is all about the prophetic charge from ancestors to destroy Persia, essentially.
This
As
is riding to the rescue, Redeemer Nation, help is on the way, all added up together, and
right,
and endorsed by a narrative that we inherited from our forefathers.
that's
So
us, but the Israeli one is different, and I'm bringing that up for a reason. The invocation here is of the ancestral charge from Purim in ancient times,
right.
2,500 years ago or so, whatever, we don't really know. But the Israeli sacred narrative is different. And what's important here is that the invocation of two sacred narratives that are fundamentally not necessarily at odds, but not necessarily congruent, highlights the fact that's really important about the war right now, I believe, and that is the fact that the goals and objectives of Israel in this war are different fundamentally from the goals and objectives of the U.S. And the U.S. has placed great emphasis on freeing, liberating the Iranian people, and destroying the wicked elements of the regime, IRGC, et cetera, et cetera. But the Israeli objective, which has been made quite clear in a recent article in Tablet magazine and by pronouncements from Israeli officials, is their goal is to destroy Iran as a power, as a force of any kind in the region, and to immiserate it, and to do the same for example, of southern Lebanon. And the bombing campaign has now focused in Gaza-like form on the Hezbollah precincts of Beirut. And it's a very different long-term goal. And the fact is that the 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 difference is critical in terms of continued American support. And whereas Israel was really driving the initiation of the war, as the war unfolds, the American element will become more and more dominant in the sense that the U.S. is completely um, the source of all um, capabilities that are being unfolded. And there's some of this.
We will speak more of this on Sunday. We have to be careful here, Germanicus.
Yes, I know that. I'm just giving you a preview.
I understand, because I want to give Jeff an opportunity to comment, because what we're the image that I will look to Gaius to present on Sunday at Londinium is the image of Berlin when Truman reached there for the Potsdam Conference.
Some of that, a lot of the
let me qualify. Right. It would be very difficult to say that Berlin was liberated. It was bricks.
Yes,
it was women who had been badly beaten by the Russians, passing bricks down from mountains, looking, and body parts everywhere. It would be very difficult to call that liberation. That looks like existential destruction. But Jeff, we have a couple of minutes. You have a thought about the narrative that's being presented out of Washington?
Well, one of the things that strikes me of what we're seeing and hearing is not much in the way of civilian casualties. And that's always been a big thing for the American public, is when they start seeing that on TV and they start hearing about it, and people get emotional and they turn that way. So, right now it seems so pinpoint. It's the police stations, the Basiji, it's the IRGC. How much longer can that go on? We're able to, safeguard the public. And when do you think it would turn? How, to a greater extent beyond just political?
We have only a minute, so tease us. Don't deliver.
I won't. But the fissures will emerge at the point where one side, and you will know which side, insists on going to the jugular, whereas the U.S. becomes ever more hesitant of the ramifications of doing just that. And I think that you've just made the perfect point about where the split in the unified front is going to be most severe. And for Sunday, I want to talk about other very tight sort of what you might call bromance alliances of two great powers in a war, how they begin to be at odds with one another, and how that affects the course of the war.
You're talking about the High Command in 1942, the Brits on one side saying, we're going to do this, and the Americans the other side said, we're not going to pay you for it. Okay, fine.
Well, yeah, I'm going to go back, too, because there's several. I mean, look at the Habsburg alliance during the 30 Years' War, or Austria-Hungary and Germany, the Hohenzollern-Habsburg, bromance. All of these are interesting examples of the fractural dynamics under pressure in a war as to which way to go. And it can become quite existential in terms of the alliance relationship.
Yes, I'll ask you, Germanicus, to find the Montgomery in Jerusalem, okay, when we come back. Germanicus is Michael Vlahos. Londinium, 6 p.m. on Sunday. Jeff Bliss is Pacific Watch. We thank you very much. We'll be back in, let's see, it's Friday. I don't remember how many hours it is till Monday morning, but there's lots of war all around the world. Good hunting, gentlemen. This is the making of the John Batchelor Show. Here comes the music. It is Roman